lots of late nights, not only for myself and Luke Jones and my next guest, as the first place Orioles head out to the West Coast, keeping us up late and, of course, getting up early with Ravens practices leading into Thursday night's game against the NFC champion, defending champion, Carolina Panthers. He is Brent Harris. He covers all things local sports, of course, at Comcast Sports Mid-Atlantic, but he is on the beat out in Owings Mills, out on the beat in heat and all that stuff, along with Clifton Brown, doing it each and every day and talking to the Ravens. And, hey, man, week and a half into this thing, we've certainly had some ups and downs, and the anticipated rookie out for the year injury and the Saturday night Ronnie Stanley thing. There's been plenty to write about, plenty to talk about out in Owings Mills, right, Brent?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, when you talk about, what they've had 9-10 practices so far, and, it's been plenty of storylines. I mean, luckily there hasn't been any real major setbacks. I think the Dennis Pitta finger injury is not going to be too significant. I think Ronnie Stanley's, what's being called soft tissue injury, doesn't seem to be too significant. So far, so good. I mean, you're going to get the bumps and bruises, and we're just all waiting for some of these guys to come off the PUP list and have Terrell Suggs, Steve Smith Sr., and some of those guys back in practice. But so far, so good. I think they've really had some crisp practices. They've got a lot of work in. Their pace of practice is just unbelievable. There's not a lot of downtime. They're running play after play, 15, 20 seconds between plays in practice. They're certainly, in my opinion, getting more work in this year than they have in a lot of years past.
Well, and for Joe Flacco and his getting back on the field when it's important, which is the Buffalo game, as we all know, you wonder how important is this, and will Ronnie Stanley play, and does Flacco need to come out there and just wave to the fans and hand the ball off for a series to start? I'm not sure, and of course fans are paying for these god-awful games, and that's a whole other story unto itself across the league we can talk about, as well as, wet and dry paint on Sunday night out in Canton, Ohio, but there is a football part of this for Flacco that is the most important thing. I mean, none of this goes without him. None of this goes without him going well. And from everything we've seen on the backfields, and it's not me or you being purple homers, he looks comfortable. He looks like Joe Flacco always looked, right?
He does. I think the most important thing is watching him step into throws. He's been accurate. I think mentally, as he said, he doesn't think about the knee, which is huge. And, we won't really know where he is mentally until he gets live action around his legs, until he has to scramble out. And we did see a couple of nice scrambles at the stadium. We've seen him use his feet a little bit in practice. He looks like he's, back to his old self, but until you get that live action, you don't know for sure. I know he wants to be on the field for the first preseason game, but again, that's only going to be for one series. I know Coach Harbaugh is going back and forth on it. He'd like to see him out there, but really, what are you going to get out of it? He certainly gets a lot more out of practice than he'll get out of one series on Thursday against the Carolina Panthers. So it'll be interesting. If he's out there, it'll be very limited. It won't be till that third preseason game, and I think we'll know a lot more after the third preseason game on where he is physically and mentally going into the season.
Well, I would say if he's out there on Thursday night, it's almost ceremonial, right? Literally, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Like you said, you got to run out there. You get dressed. You go through your warm-ups with your team, and then go out for a series, and then you call tonight.
Well, and I'm hoping that happens. I mean, certainly for the paying fans and all of us over there, but for your eyes, and I know you're doing the field reporting on this thing, hopefully the field's in better shape than Canton was on Sunday night, Brennan. Neither one of us were up there in Philadelphia 15 years ago, but I know we're going to talk to Coach Billick about it out of Greenmount Station on Tuesday night. But what are you looking for on Thursday night? Your eyes for certain players. And again, I don't think that we're going to see enough of Weddle to know what kind of player he is, or see enough of Ladarius Webb to say, well, he's going to be fine at the safety position this year. I look at the whole depth chart, and I want health. I mean, that's all I care about in any of this. I don't judge too much on whether someone makes an interception or drops a ball, or a running back gets stripped. I don't put a lot of stock in these games, but I know the coaches sure do.
They do. They're going to watch the tape. They're going to see how you play against another team, obviously, and I think the Ravens are excited to see Kamalei Correa hit, somebody other than some guys on their own team. Let him loose and see what he can do. I think they're excited to see, the entire running back core. I think getting a couple of carries for Justin Forsett and Buck Allen and Terrence West, I think they feel like they have a lot of depth at that position this year. And I think they're excited to hand the ball off and see a lot of that running game on Thursday night. And I think you make a great point. Webb and Weddle together, again, we probably won't see a whole lot of them in this first preseason game, but seeing them together, I think, kind of figuring out how they're going to fit in. Again, neither one of them are really a strong safety, but they're both playmakers. They're both veterans. They should be so much better back there just in their leadership. And but I think they're excited to see what they can do on the field together.
It's as nice as it is to see a healthy C.J. Mosley and a healthy Brandon Williams running around out there. I still think there's a whole point of all of this where in these games the rookies and the young players, they're going to be the ones doing the sweating, and it's going to be more about Brent Urban coming back, who we really haven't seen, or Carl Lewis, who looked pretty good in the preseason last year when he got a lot of reps and didn't get as much. Capron Lewis Moore, another guy that had some injuries. There's a lot of these guys, Matt Elam as well, who have been down the depth chart, injured, and Terrence Brooks, another guy, hasn't had it. The guys that we've heard a lot about in April and May, maybe a little bit about in August, but this seemed to go on the milk carton at some point once September rolls around the last few years. Some of these guys, in watching the second and the third quarter on Thursday night, you'll get a little bit of better vibe to see them play because you might not see so much of them during the regular season.
That's true. I think Matt Elam and Terrence Brooks are fighting for a position, a spot on this roster. So that's going to be interesting to see how they play. It's important. You may be going against second and third team players while you're on the field, but for those guys, they need to do all the little things right. Their technique needs to be right. They need to make plays. And the tape that they put together in these preseason games will be very important in that final decision. So huge for guys like that. I want to watch a guy like Tavon Young at corner, a rookie who has really, I think, impressed a lot of people so far in camp. But again, you're talking about a week and a half or so.
By the way, Lucas talked a lot about him, too. He really is one of the, between him and Terrence West, I hear more about them over the last 10 days than anybody, right?
I also think you can add Alex Lewis on the offensive line to that conversation because we don't think Ronnie Stanley will play a ton if he plays at all on Thursday, depending on this injury and how he comes back. So I think Lewis will get a lot of action. I think the coaches are really high on him, see what he can do. So there's definitely a lot to watch. I think as a Ravens fan, you don't get the starters these first couple of games, but I think the overall scheme of how this team's put together, these end up being very important games. And certainly I think there'll be a lot to keep an eye on the field if you're there on Thursday night or watching on TV. And, there's young guys, there's rookies, there's guys fighting for positions. I think it'll be a lot of fun to see how it sort of unfolds.
Funny that we've sat here and talked about all of these positions and stuff. We really haven't even talked about the wide receiver position, which is the one we've talked about, I think, for 9 months, right? Whether it's Steve Smith coming back, whether it's Perryman actually getting on the field, whether Mike Wallace can sort of revive his career. I know Chris Moore had some injury issues. And then there's Kamar Aiken, who just comes in and catches passes, right? That's what he did last year, kind of quietly, and we'll see how that goes. From the veteran perspective of the injuries, Brent, whether it's Suggs, whether it's Smith, whether it's Pitta, I don't think really deep down Harbaugh, Ozzie, anybody that's put this thing together, even the position coaches, are really counting on any of those injured veterans to be a presence, not just here in training camp, but I think they're pretending like they might be able to live the season without any of them, and whatever they get from Suggs, whatever they get from Steve Smith, whatever Dennis Pitta has to offer at this point would be a bonus. I don't think those guys are a part of the master plan. I think they're a part of the plan 1A.
Yeah, they're the plan for this year, and I think when you look at what the Ravens have done drafting and free agency, both at wide receiver and at that rush end outside linebacker, they've really added a ton of depth, and that was important because you can't necessarily count on Suggs or Steve Smith to be the players they were 5 years ago, and especially when you talk about the injuries. I mean, Smith's injury being what we heard, a double Achilles rupture. Suggs now with 2 Achilles injuries and surgeries. You just never know, but I think they've done a great job of adding depth to those positions. The real interesting thing is, offensively, you don't know who's going to have the big year for him, who's going to be the go-to player that they can count on to make big plays and score touchdowns. What they have is a ton of depth. And they have guys like, Kamar Aiken, who, look, what he did last year after Steve Smith went out is huge for his confidence. He obviously knows he can play at this level and play at that level, being maybe a 1,000-yard receiver, being a guy that can catch double-digit touchdowns. And so it did so much for his confidence going into this year. I think adding Mike Wallace, he could certainly stretch the field. I think he can be a guy that could make a lot of plays for you as well. But you don't know yet which direction they're going to go in for those playmakers. And, the good news is, again, you're deep at running back, you're deep at tight end, you have a lot of receivers, but none of them are sort of those 1A players that stand out, the perennial Pro Bowlers. Will you get a Pro Bowler out of that group? Maybe. But going in, you don't have that proven guy that you're going to count on every snap. And so I think it's intriguing. It's probably a bit nerve-wracking for the coaches, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of promise.
He is Brent Harris. Brent CSN is the way to find him out on Twitter, reporter host for Comcast Sports Mid-Atlantic, and, of course, at Ravens Practice each and every day. Little known that Brent is also a doctor, and he's going to explain soft tissue injuries to us. What the hell is a soft tissue injury, Brent?
To me, I guess it means it's a bruise.
Yeah, I guess, right?
But you know what it is? It's very vague. And I think that's how they like it. So.
Well, we're all trying to interpret that between now and Thursday. And I think there's a definite sense of alarm with the kind of injuries that happened last year and the depth of all of it that we've been talking about now for 10 minutes, that any tweak to Ronnie Stanley, Jeff Zrebiec's in front of Stanley after the game. And, Urschel saying, don't say anything about your injury, right? And Ronnie's kind of standing there, and you know what a sort of soft-spoken, humble dude he is. And Zrebiec's like, come on, dude. You're the first-round draft pick. I got to ask you this stuff, I mean, you walk off the field after practice, even if it's just a little tweak, we're going to have to ask that question for sure.
Yeah, I imagine Coach Harbaugh has coached up Ronnie Stanley on how to deal with this, the injury part of this. I mean, they don't want too much getting out, but they don't want to make a big deal about it. I think when you look back to last year, what happened with Rashard Perryman, Coach Harbaugh is being very cautious as to how much information they put out. And he tried to be honest last year, but the information kept changing from the doctors, and the timeline kept changing from the doctors, and then all of a sudden Harbaugh is the one who's out in front telling the media about what the injury is, and then he's the one that really looked bad in the end, even though it really wasn't his fault. So I think they're going to be very cautious in how much information they put out. They did the same thing with Dennis Pitta. It's with the injuries. It's a finger, but they wouldn't say much more than that. So, we'll see. I mean, again, every rep's important for Ronnie Stanley. So the sooner they can get him back out on the field, certainly the better.
Brent, Terrence West has made some waves out there, and obviously now working on a third organization and has bounced around a little bit. I saw Ambrose out there with him. Maybe there's a level of comfort here, being here that, and certainly a level of confidence that he probably had to shake off after the Cleveland experience and then moving on again. Thoughts about him? He's touched the ball a whole lot out there on the backfields.
I think he feels a lot of responsibility. Being from Baltimore, having a lot of his friends and family so close by, he's a new dad. There's a lot going on in his life, and he really just took the off-season and focused, became very businesslike, dropped about 20 pounds, much quicker, great burst. Coach Harbaugh and some of the offensive coaches, Coach Trestman, they've all talked about his vision. He makes great cuts, and I think that fits well in what they want to do with that, the running game. It's really important in the running game is to have some patience, quick burst, and make the right decision and where you're going to kind of pop it up and what hole you're going to hit. So, he really has looked great so far through this preseason and in training camp. So we'll see. Now he's got to do it in games, but I think the potential is there. We always knew he had the potential from what he did in college, but now seeing him finally focused, finally with such a business-like attitude is really, I think, paying off.
This has been a lot less of a circus this year in a lot of ways, right? I mean, it really feels like the backfields that they have in Owings Mills, that they're getting good at getting fans in and out, and it's a good experience for the players, for the coaches, for the autographs, all of that stuff. I think even the stadium practices, the sort of low-key Monday one, the Saturday one went wonderfully, the fireworks and all that. And I sense from John Harbaugh with beating around with his brother 2 years ago, going up to Philadelphia, then the long road trip and living in San Jose where you lived last year, as well as Cliff from CSN that 1 week. This is a little bit more calm and a little bit more the way John would prefer it, this particular training camp.
I mean, it's the main reason why they have training camp at Owings Mills and not Westminster, because you just get so much more work done. You are able to rehab and get your rest so much better in your own facility. And, if you look at this training camp compared to last year or any time they've had the joint practices or scrimmages, it's just, to me, just more efficient. They're getting more out of it. And that's what's important right now. This is a young team, a lot of rookies, a lot of youngsters on this team, and I think this is probably a lot more vital than lining up against another team for a couple of days in a joint practice. I don't think that they felt like they got a ton out of it last year. And, I think this is, back to basics for them. And, I think it's important. You make a great point. It's very low-key. Going into the season, such a better travel schedule. Dallas, Jacksonville are going to be their furthest trip. You're playing the NFC East. And so, you've got that, a trip up to New York. You got the teams coming into Baltimore. Back-to-back weeks into that stadium up in East Rutherford. So, I think the travel schedule is so much better. They're really limiting, what they have to do this training camp as far as travel, as far as getting their work in early. Really, the guys love the fact they have the 8:45 a.m. practice, and they're done off the practice field early, and they hit the classroom, and they get a walkthrough, and then it feels a lot more like a 9 to 5 than a 9 to 9. And so these guys, are getting home, getting their rest, and I'd say it's much different than last year, and they hope that pays dividends.
Have you seen enough to be confident or feeling more good about the Ravens this year being a 10, 11, 12-win team than bad at this point? I mean, certainly seeing Flacco out there slinging it, as he likes to say. I feel better about them than I did 2 weeks ago, just watching them practice a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly feel better. They're a better team. This is not a 5-win team. And because things line up the way they do for this season, I think realistically, 8, 9, 10 wins is pretty much where they should be. And but I don't see them anywhere under 500. I think it's a much better team, not only getting some of the injured players back, because, again, we said you can't really count on Steve Smith or Terrell Suggs in getting maybe what we're used to getting out of them, but it's just a deeper team. They can handle injuries a little bit better, a lot more depth. It's a young team, but I think the youngsters seem to be coming along a lot quicker maybe than they even anticipated. And I think having Joe back and healthy is obviously the biggest key. Right now, that looks good.
Brent, always good having you on, man. I know it's a busy week and certainly a busy time, and you'll be up late with you. How about those first-place Orioles, right? We didn't even talk about them. You want to pile on in any way? I mean, it's Dylan Bundy thing's cool. Machado hitting home runs, first place, staying up late. It's been a little while since we've had this problem of an awesome pennant race mixed in with our training camp football, right? Not to mention the Olympics and Phelps and all of that, right?
Yeah, and it's crazy, too, because it feels like a pennant race right now. I mean, you're looking at the standings every day because it's so tight. And for the Orioles, look, they can't even afford a bad week. A bad week, and you're out of the playoffs. So what they're doing under the pressure that they're doing it is great. Obviously, Manny Machado on Sunday having the game he had, seeing Chris Davis finally get a good swing. And I thought, the announcers making a great point that, it's so much about the mentality of going to the plate and feeling good, that it's so true in baseball. A couple of good swings can turn things around. And we know Chris Davis is a streaky hitter. And if he starts to lock in a little bit, if he sees the baseball a little better, he can certainly go on a tear. Bats are great. Watching Bundy have the last several outings he's had has been awesome because, you really don't have a solid number one, but Chris Tillman is solid. You throw Bundy in there is looking more like the ace of the staff right now. They are deeper. Going out and getting Miley, I think, helps because now you get the lefty. I like this pitching staff so much better than I did a month ago. So a lot of positives. It'll be fun, though. Like you said, it's a pennant chase here. The last month and a half of the season, it'll be a lot of fun. I think it'll be exciting to watch, and hopefully they can continue what they're doing.
Even more than just winning the division, it'll be fun watching the Red Sox screw this up, right?
Oh yeah. It should be, it'll be interesting this week watching A-Rod's final return to Fenway Park. That'll be a lot of fun. Little Red Sox Yankees this week.
I bet it all begins with boo and you suck. Yeah.
It might, but you know what? With Ortiz also going out at some point, I bet you the fans there, great fans. I bet you at some point they give A-Rod a nice little send-off. So we'll see.
Have you been to Boston?
I've been there. I think the first two games, maybe by the third game they'll lighten up on him a little bit.
Depends if he's 0 for 9 going into that game or not. Brent, great having you on, man. Rest up this week. Stay up late with the Birds, and we'll see you down at the stadium on Thursday night for the Panthers.
Awesome. Thanks, Nestor.
You got it. Brent CSN out on Twitter. That is Brent Harris. You can follow his journey out there as well as at Comcast Sports Mid-Atlantic. And you know they are on the Ravens each and every night along with Clifton Brown, who we'll probably have on the show next week because we try to rotate out and have different guys on at different points. We're going all around the National Football League this week as well as out to the Bay Area where the Orioles, the first-place Orioles, are taking on the A's and the Giants. It's going to be a big week here. Don't forget, we got head coach Brian Billick joining us Tuesday night at Greenmount Station for crab cakes and beer and football conversation as well. Our triumphant return to Carroll County. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry, honoring our friends at Living Classrooms and our partner, along with Brian Billick, who is our partner on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. We got Maritime Magic coming up in a couple of weeks. Big doings here in the Charm City as we await maybe some playoff baseball and certainly some regular season football. And I'm sure Michael Phelps will be bringing back a pocket full of gold medals from Rio and maybe dysentery with it, but who knows. You can find me out in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear. We're on Facebook Live. We're on our YouTube WNST TV channel live as well. Everything is archived. And, of course, our morning newspaper hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. full of headlines, news, box scores, standings, and chock full of great information. That is all brought to you, powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Last but never least, any breaking news that happens first on the WNST Tech Service. If you're on it, you know before anybody. It's pretty simple. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. It is our best service, and we highly recommend that you subscribe to that. Anytime, anywhere, you can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat. We're everywhere you are and everywhere you want to be. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.